Korvash was already pressing his head against my ribs when the door slid open, and Overcommander Drenix walked in on me mid-count. I didn't stop. 22, I said, low, the way I always said it, running my eyes down the row of cots and crates and curled gold bodies in the pen. 23. 24. Drenix stood in the doorway with his arms folded and that look he saved for things he didn't understand and had decided not to respect. Aide, he said, tell me you are not counting the war pride like livestock. Headcount, I said, every night habit. It's a tick. He said it the way you diagnose a disease. You're a supply clerk, not a shepherd. The pride doesn't need a bedtime story. Behind him, 2 handlers shifted their weight, not quite meeting my eyes. They knew better than to argue with an overcommander 3 days before an evacuation drill. Effective tonight, the ritual stops. I won't have my staff infantilizing 6 apex predators in front of the relief column when they arrive. I should have let it go. I'd been a supply clerk on this rock for 4 years, counting crates of recycled water and counting 6 lion-maned aliens the size of plow horses with the same flat patience, and nobody had ever cared before. But Korvash's head was still against my ribs, heavy and warm, and his eyes were open and watching Drenix with the particular stillness that meant he understood exactly what was being decided, even if the words weren't his. Sir, I said, they expect it. They're animals, Aide, they don't expect anything. He turned on his heel. No more counting. That night I didn't count. I lay on my cot in the aide's quarters above the pens, and within the hour I heard it, not a roar, nothing so simple. A low rolling sound that traveled up through the floor, 6 throats doing it at once, patient and insistent. The sound a pride makes when something in the den is wrong and they intend to fix it. I went down in my undershirt at 11 at night, and Korvash was sitting upright at the pen gate, gold mane catching the low lamp, staring at the latch like he was deciding whether 400 pounds of muscle could be reasonable about a door. Easy, I said, I'm here. He didn't move until I'd gone down the row, 22, 23, 24. Only when I said the last number did he lay back down, and the other 5 settled with him like a held breath let out. I didn't tell Drenix. I just kept doing it quietly after he'd gone to bed, and the pride kept going quiet for me, and for 11 nights that was the whole arrangement. His order standing on the books, his pride answering to a ritual he'd forbidden, neither of us saying a word. The handlers noticed. Garrison handler Priya Halst found me on the 9th night and said nothing, just stood at the gate with her arms crossed and a look that wasn't quite a smile. You know what they call it now, she said. Among themselves, I mean. The quartermaster's mass, I told her I hadn't named it anything. Doesn't matter, she said. They have. Korvash brings the cubs to the gate before you even arrive. They're not settling for the count. They're settling for you saying it. I didn't think much of that, until the evacuation alarm went up 3 days early. Pirate raiders had taken the relief column's escort ship in the outer belt, and Garrison Command pulled the timeline forward without warning. Full evacuation, civilian and military both, transports loading inside 6 hours. I spent the morning running crates to the pad, and somewhere in that chaos a junior logistics clerk, not me, a kid named Oren who'd been on the rock 11 days, compiled the final manifest off an outdated roster. My name wasn't on it. Neither was a maintenance tech who transferred in the same week I had. 2 souls, quietly absent from the only list that mattered. I didn't know it yet. I was down at the pens, loading the pride into their transport crates the way I'd done a dozen drills before, and that was where the trouble actually started. Korvash wouldn't go in the crate. He sat in the open hatch of the loading ramp, 600 pounds of gold mane patience, and looked at me, and would not move. The other 5 sat behind him in a loose half-circle, the cubs pressed in close, and none of them so much as flinched when the ramp crew shouted for clearance. Drenix arrived at a run, furious, the evacuation clock bleeding minutes behind him. Get that animal in the crate, Aide, now. He won't load, I said. He's never refused a drill before. Then make him. I tried. I put my hand on his shoulder and said the only thing I had, the bedtime line, the 11-night habit, 22, 23. I counted the pride out loud right there on the ramp in front of the Overcommander, in front of the panicking ground crew, and I got to 24 and stopped, because there were only 23. Korvash made a sound I'd never heard from him before, not a roar, something closer to a question, and put his nose against the manifest board clipped to the ramp rail. Then he took the whole board off the rail in his teeth and dropped it at Drenix's boots. Drenix stared down at it like it had bitten him. "He's telling you to count," I said. "It's what he does when the number's wrong. There is no time for this. 2 names are missing." I'd already seen it, kneeling over the board, my own name absent from the load list, Oren's outdated roster staring back at us both. Mine and Hask from maintenance. We're both still on the rock. For one long second Drenix said nothing at all, and the whole loading bay held still around him, the pride sitting immovable in the hatch, the ground crew waiting on his word, the evacuation clock ticking down behind every one of us. Then he picked the board up himself, scanned it, and went the color of old paper. "Find Hask," he said to the nearest runner. "Now, and get Eddery's name back on this list before that animal decides to make it permanent." They found Hask in 9 minutes, asleep in a supply closet after a double shift, missed by the same outdated roster. The moment both our names went back on the board, Korvash rose, turned, and walked into the crate without being asked twice, the other 5 filing in behind him like nothing at all had happened. Drenix didn't apologize. Men like him rarely do, out loud. But 3 weeks later on the relief station, I found a standing garrison order pinned outside the pens in his own hand. Nightly pride headcount mandatory to be read aloud by name. He'd given it a heading, counted and kept. I never asked him what changed his mind. I didn't need to. I'd seen it on his face in the loading bay, the moment a war pride that answered to nobody refused to leave a rock without 2 names that weren't even theirs. Some nights now, when I run the count, Korvash doesn't wait for the numbers anymore. He waits for his name, and then mine, side by side on the same list, kept the same way. 24, present, accounted for. Every one of us, every night, for as long as he decides that's how it's done.